direction, sets the stage to turn the page. At the raising of the curtain, I am hurting and uncertain of the parts that we have played. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again? Fading out of the close-up, everybody's reeling, no concealing. Your beauty is seed stealing. Violins are singing, sunsets waiting, radiating. Your entrance is breathtaking. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 15 of the Four Wall Sunday Roundtable. My name is Drew. After a few weeks off, we're back on, so I'm really happy to be back, and I'm going to be joined by my co-host Jeff Kreuter. Jeff, I can see your camera is off, so I don't know where you are, but I hope you come soon. Okay.
Right here. Sorry. I was right on it. Sorry, Drew. Hey, Drew, how are you?
Good. I mean, aside from that minor heart attack I just had, I think I'm doing okay.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. Sorry about the heart attack, Drew.
No.
Hey, Drew, how's the family? How's the baby? Do we get to see some baby pictures?
Yep. I got them up over here. That's my son and my daughter. I do like photography on the side a little bit, so I was able to snap a few photos of them. That's my son right there, little Marlon Brando, Teddy Brando is what we're calling him. So, yeah, it's great. I'm tired. My wife's tired.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Shout out to my wife for holding it down with the two kids right now while I do this show. So,
thank you. Congratulations again. I'm glad everything's going well. And,
thank you.
Before we get going, we want to say that next week we're going to have 4 lighting designers who just completed projects during the pandemic. That's right, lighting designers who are working during the pandemic. Suna Rothier, Otis Howard, Ken Billington, and Michael Valcam. And we will talk to them about how it went. And I'm sort of very curious, dying to know. We also want to mention the Red Alert Restart Day of Action that so many participated in. It was on September 1st. I know Four Wall did in many locations. And Drew, for those who don't know, can you explain what that was?
Yeah, I'll pop some photos up of some of our Four Wall locations went red last week in support of the hundreds of thousands of entertainment workers who have lost their livelihoods and to this day face a very uncertain future. The mission from our shops and the thousands of others participating in Red Alert Restart was to build some well-needed momentum to push legislators to support a pair of measures that would help reduce the financial strain on the live events industry. So we had, that's Vegas, DC, LA, a lot of Four Wall locations. And then you had mentioned the Empire State Building even went red in support. So it was awesome to see it around the country. And and it was just great to see the industry pull together for one night. So it was great.
Yep, a lot of theaters, big and small, all across the country as well, lit their places up red. I was trying to light one of my trees red, but it didn't work out so well. I don't think anyone here would have cared.
I would have showed a picture if you showed it.
It is pretty shocking that Washington can't get it done to approve another relief package. They say nothing will be done before the election. So we all have to continue to let them know that doing nothing is unacceptable. Write your people. Speaking of the election, there's an important one happening right now, and not the one you think I'm talking about. United Scenic Artists, the union that represents designers and scenic artists who work in live entertainment, film, and television, are currently holding elections, and we are joined by a very special guest, Carl Mulert, who works for the union. Hi, Carl.
Hey, thanks, Drew. Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
First off, Carl, I want to thank you for all the work you've done and continue to do. These are tough times, and I'm happy to know that there's someone like you advocating for us. And we will one day have you on a panel and take a deep dive into what you do for the union and for all of us. But at the moment, we're here to talk about the election. It's strange to me that I have to ask this question, but since so few people pay attention, Carl, tell us why it's important. Why should everyone vote, and why should members pay attention?
Let me start just by saying, in a similar way, I mean, there actually are two important elections happening right now, as you point out, Jeff. It's the union election and the federal election. And there is something that they share, which is only 30% of our members actually vote, of union members in United Scenic Artists USA 829. Our average is that only 30% of the members vote. It is a similar problem, as we know, in the United States. But right now, we're just going to talk about the union. So why is it important for union members to vote? I am fond of the corny expression, the union begins with you. And that's why you should vote. This is your union. We on the staff work at the pleasure of the members. We are your voice. We work for you. You tell us what you want us to do, essentially. So voting is the most basic thing that you can do to instill leaders in the union that you feel share your ideals, your values, and your goals for what you would like the union to be doing. We're facing a very challenging time. We have thousands of members out of work. It is likely the largest crisis this union has faced since the Great Depression. We're not alone. Our colleagues at other IATSE locals, at Actors Equity, at Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers, SAG-AFTRA, all across the board, we're all facing the same thing. Our task is to get as many of our members back to work as quickly as we can safely. And at the same time, we have a major shift that is upon us, which is to rethink our systems, to rethink how we do things, to combat and confront racism everywhere we can within the union, within our lives, within ourselves. And so I encourage all of the members of USA 829, read the individual candidate statements on your ballot. This is not about voting for any group of candidates. It's about voting for individuals. And I think that it's no secret which individual I support. That does not mean that there are great individuals in every race, multiple individuals in every race. I think it is the most engaged election I have ever witnessed in my 10 plus years at the union. Some of the outgoing leaders of our union have said they have not seen an election with this much engagement from the membership in maybe 20 years, which is very exciting. There are numerous candidates running. So do your homework, read the candidate statements, ask questions. Most importantly, vote. Whoever you vote for, vote.
Thank you, Carl.
Yep.
I'll add that while only 30% of the members vote, a larger percentage like to complain. So,
I didn't say that.
I can say that. So vote if you want your voice heard. This is the way to start.
That's right.
So thank you very much, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
See you very soon.
Yep.
Thank you, Carl.
Take care, guys. Have a good night.
Alrighty, thank you.
I will only add, and this is no surprise for me either, I'm fully and enthusiastically supporting Eddie Pierce for union president. Please get out and vote, and I would say vote for Eddie. So tonight we have a group of associate lighting designers on the show. Let's bring them on.
Awesome. Well, our first guest is Roya Abab. Roya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Roya work for two companies, Arc3 and Alvin Ailey, both. Yeah,
that's correct.
And we have Craig Stelzenmuller, associate lighting designer for Broadway productions of shows like Pretty Woman, School of Rock, and Matilda, and many, many others.
Hello. Hello, Craig.
Oh, hey, Craig.
And next is Christina J Martin from Visual Terrain. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Christina. And Vivien Leone, also associate lighting designer. It's Broadway, done Tootsie, Spider-Man, Shuffle Along, and many others. Welcome to the show, everyone. Nice to see everyone.
Good to be here.
How are you all doing tonight?
Good. Pretty good.
All right.
Awesome.
I think we're going to start. Let's start with Craig. Craig, can you tell us where do you work primarily? What do you do?
I do Broadway shows as an associate. I do plays and musicals. I work for a variety of people and designers. And I also do tours when the Broadway shows go on tours, sometimes when shows start out as a tour. And I primarily work in theater. And also international productions when the shows move internationally. And sometimes I do regional shows. I try to do my own design work as well, but it's hard to fit that in with longer contracts with Broadway shows and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. Roya, how about you?
Like you mentioned, mostly Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and Arc3 Design. Those two things take up a good amount of my time. At Ailey, it's both U.S. domestic tour as well as international tour, and our New York seasons here in December and in June. And Arc3 is a variety of things, events, music, productions, architecture, all of the above.
Everything. I should mention Arc3 is Al Crawford's company, who's been on the show and is
correct.
We love, who doesn't love Al?
Yeah.
Vivien, how about you?
Similar to Craig, I work on Broadway and all of its before and afters, whether that's coming in from regional or going out on tour or internationally. And I am going to mention that I have worked on Phantom of the Opera since its original opening in New York as well.
Wow, that's incredible. Do you go back? Is that something that is an ongoing?
Yes, I do the maintenance for it. Yes.
Amazing.
And
Are there still like 360 cues? A very specific question. People want
360 KL Altman units.
Wow. Old stuff for those of you who.
It's a living museum. Anyway.
Christina, how about you? You do something a little bit different than everyone else here.
Yeah, so primarily I work for Visual Terrain, and they do themed entertainment, attractions, and the arts. We kind of do a breadth of work from architecture to theme park attractions to hospitality projects, and we work on projects all over the United States and internationally as well. So I get to travel to a lot of cool places, but in my free time, I also continue to freelance as a theatrical lighting designer when I can.
Amazing. I do, Craig mentioned that also, and I want to get into that a little bit later to ask you about how you balance that. But
yeah, but let's talk about how you got your start and how you got into lighting. Christina, we'll stick with you.
All right. Well, I got into theater because I wanted to be a performer. I even have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in musical theater. But my third year of school, we had a new scenic and lighting professor came in, and I wanted to introduce myself because I had just come back from summer stock and I was late. So we got to talking, and he said, you know, you should consider taking my intro to lighting class. And I said, I can't draw. And I thought I would never be able to do something like this. And I ended up taking the class, and I fell in love, and I just never stopped. And then I just kind of tried to pivot my career a little bit more when I got older into themed entertainment. I just didn't know that it was an option. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Cool. That's awesome. Roya, how about you? Where'd you get your start?
Similarly, I acted as a child, and I did regional theater growing up and did it in high school as well. And in high school, I had to do all of the technical elements of the production as well. And I realized that I much preferred telling the story through light as opposed to being on stage. So I went to North Carolina School of the Arts and got a BFA in lighting design.
Awesome.
I sometimes still act as a child. So,
all right, Craig, are you gonna continue the theme? Did you want to be an actor or
similar? I was a kid magician, and I was really into magic. This was in the '80s, and so I was into David Copperfield, and we did a little magic show that we toured around, and then got into community theater and I had this love of illusion, and so that sort of developed into lighting. Then at 15, I saw Pink Floyd in concert, that Division Bell tour, and I came home and I announced that I was going to be a lighting designer. And so I, like Roya, went to North Carolina School of the Arts through the encouragement of Al Crawford, who I knew from Raleigh, North Carolina, where I grew up, and then moved here.
Al Crawford, producer of the show and Four Wall. He's here. Hi, Al.
Hi, Al.
Vivien, how about you? Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
I started in junior high school in theater because I didn't fit anywhere else. And I did every job there was to do, from building flats to painting to box office to prop stage management. And I thought I wanted to be a set designer. And then in college, I realized that lighting was the perfect fit for me in terms of telling stories and expressing myself. And I've been doing it ever since.
Amazing. Amazing. Do you guys have an echo, or is that just me?
No,
I don't.
We're going to ignore this. So, Craig, let's go to you for this next one. So
Okay.
there are varying degrees of what an associate designer does and what an associate designer is. What is your opinion? What is an associate lighting designer?
Well, I think that in addition to making sure that the LD has what they need at all times and running the lighting team, it's also about keeping an eye on all of the details and from other departments and making sure that those details check out against the bigger picture of what's going on. So like if somebody moves a lamp, or somebody moves a chair, then what's the ripple effect of that down the line? So I think it's being incredibly detailed, but also being very big picture and networking with other departments.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the definitions, I'd say.
Well, maybe we'll hit some more. Roya, how about you? What's your opinion?
I like that definition. I think that they, with my two companies, they're actually pretty different. At Ailey, Al Crawford jokingly calls me the gatekeeper. And I think that that's a pretty good way to explain it, because you are the keeper and distributor of all of the lighting information. And like Craig said, you also interface with the other departments and make sure everything checks out there. In the event side of things, it can be a little bit more broad, and you can have an entire room to yourself where you are making creative decisions and moving the process along, because it can be much more spread out. And maybe there's one assistant in this room, another assistant in that room, the designer in the other room. So it can be varying degrees of responsibility.
How about you, Vivien?
The way I describe it is that an associate needs to be able to do everything the designer does and everything the assistant does, both at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Because you just never know when you're going to have to been, whether it's to write a light cue because the design is coming back from somewhere and his main site got canceled, or whether it's, there's a problem at the shop and they need to figure out how to redesign the thing, or whether it's, keeping those focus charts up to date so that they can recreate maintain the show later. I think that's what that's been my experience.
Yeah. So an extension, an extension of the lighting designer, someone else with two more eyes, assuming you have two. Christina, how about you? You do something a little bit different.
Yeah, but I would say that it's still really similar, like there may be a moment where I have to make a decision and I need to know what the designer would be thinking at that particular moment. And, there are other times where I get to work with the designer, but they're really busy working on one section of the design. So they're like, hey, please take this part of the design. And so I have to kind of create that same, overall scope of work and design aesthetic to match and make sure that it kind of comes together at the end. But I think the other cool part about what I get to do is that there's a whole team of us. And so, like, let's say that I get sick or I get injured and I'm out for a week, which actually happened this spring. I have a team.
No more.
Yeah. I have a whole team of other people that can like pick up the slack for me and take charge of the project. And then when I come back, they can kind of relay the information to me of what I missed,
What happened? Did you get hurt on the job?
No. So I got really into cycling and I ended up breaking my leg. So I shattered my tibia and fibia and had to have emergency surgery in April.
Wow.
So I was really lucky that I had a whole team of people because they were like, oh, Christina, like you don't need to come to work tomorrow. Just come back when you're ready,
Sure. Yeah. Very lucky.
Yeah. Glad you're okay.
Yeah.
So with the answers you just gave, maybe we can just kind of dive in a little deeper. And what would you say is the difference between an assistant lighting designer and an associate lighting designer?
Now, I will say there are some people who really care about the distinction, like the letters between the A and the T, assistant, associate, So what's, Craig, what's your take? Where do you draw the line?
I think it's the prep weeks is what it is. It's about the amount of time. You're involved as an associate, you're involved in the process earlier usually, and I think that's a big difference. And then then there's like a sharing of the paperwork, and people can talk about how that and jobs when you're in the theater. But if there's only one person sitting next to the lighting designer, then you got to do everything, whether you're called the assistant or the associate. So it doesn't, So in some ways it's a little fluid, but it's the proximity to the LD's chair. Like if the LD doesn't show up, you then have to sit there and make something up.
Yeah. Right.
And Vivien, you want to add anything to that?
I think that what Craig has said is true. It's the proximity to the designer, not just physically or with the lighting cues, but it's also with the sort of decision-making process along the way, and the ability to act somewhat autonomously, be a little bit more in their head than just laying stuff out for them. An assistant would do.
I guess there is a pecking order, but is there an experience factor? I mean, could you be on a show where the assistant and the associate have the same amount of experience? Does that happen in your world, Vivien? I mean, on a really big show, I guess that's very helpful.
That has happened in my experience, and I think that it was with myself and another person whom I adore, and we just but what happened was we still kept titles very distinct, because otherwise the crew gets a little confused, and chain of communication is absolutely tantamount to making things go smoothly. So even though we were of similar experience, we still kept that hierarchy, so the crew wasn't confused and information wasn't just kind of floating around the theater.
Got it. Yeah. Christina, does that apply to your world? Is there a hierarchy like that?
Definitely. Let's say that I'm out on a site where I'm 8 hours ahead of everybody else, but I have somebody back in the office working on things and trying to get things done, so I have answers by the next day. But like I'm on site, and when they're on-site questions, those questions come to me first, and then I have to either relay them to the team or the principal designer and kind of live in their shoes as that person on site. And then other times I say, I really need to get an answer from my principal designer. Just give me a day and I'll get that information back to you.
Cool.
And Roya, you want to add anything?
I'm pretty much in agreement with everyone. I think it's largely about an empowerment to make decisions, and a level of responsibility is kind of the differentiation in my mind.
I think there's one other thing, if I can jump in, that there's also a difference in the pay that you can command. Like you can just command a higher salary for the title associate. So if it doesn't make a difference to anyone, sometimes designers, even when I was coming up, people gave me a chance when I was younger and said, we'll just call you an associate because why not? It's free.
Sure.
And you're able to So there's
yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, as a designer, and I think as an assistant way back in the 150 years ago, I feel like there was that meant something. When I was called an associate, I feel like it meant that I graduated to some level under a designer's tutelage. And I've had people whom I've hired say specifically ask for that title, and I feel like every time I'm like, oh my god, of course. I mean I should probably just say that that's what it is. Vivien, you wanted to add something.
Well, I was going to say it's not dissimilar to what's the difference between a production electrician and a head electrician in terms of the communication sort of flow. So that's another kind of thing to help people not confuse them when they're both in the room.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. So here's another.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Drew. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, speaking of Al Crawford, he said.
Well, and and speaking of that, if there are people watching who have questions or comments or disagreements with what we're talking about, feel free to comment. We'll bring those comments in and let our group of guests respond to you directly right now, or just text them. Okay. So here, this next question I'm going to ask is, it comes up a lot, and I will say we've spoken with teachers about this, and they have a very strong opinion. So there are differing opinions about whether schools should include assistant design in their curriculum. What do you think? Did you learn assisting on the job, or was it part of college? Vivien, let's go to you. Do you think that it should be part of college?
I am one of the people that has I'm on the fence on it. I have to be honest with you. I did not learn it in college. I learned how to be a good assistant by designing. And those moments where you're a designer and you don't have an assistant and like, oh my God, I wish there was two of me. So then when I went after I designed, I went back to assisting, I would be on the lookout for those moments, just kind of figured it out. And then when I was assisting, I would always watch the design and think, oh, I want to do that. Or, wow, that's the color combination I would have thought of. So the two of them really, really, really at each other. And then the third element was I learned how to be an assistant actually from production.
Yeah.
They were the ones that read me the riot act. Designer, as long as you're not like totally getting in the designer's way, stepping on the designer's foot, especially on Broadway, the production electrician that really go for the jugular on making sure
Yeah, I mean, you're the conduit. As the associate, you're the conduit between the lighting designer and the electrician. And the electrician has an awful lot of work to do. And they all want things a certain way, and none of them are the same. And I feel like part of the associate's job and the assistant both is to keep the electrician happy. I think that's hugely important. Roya, let's go to you next.
I guess I began learning in college. The way that the curriculum is structured at School of the Arts is you are required to assist other student designers. So I probably assisted on 4 or 5 productions before I graduated, and that helped ease into it. And I think that it's important to teach at least a little bit in that way, like allowing the students to assist other people, because it is often one of the first jobs that people will have outside of school or when they enter the field, whether or not you go to school. But I also think a lot of the skills that are most important in being an associate are things that you have to learn on the job. It's not about paperwork or calling a focus. It's like anticipating the needs of the designer, or zooming out and seeing the big picture and figuring out what's the most efficient way to do something while 18 other things are happening. I think those qualities are easier to learn on the job than they are taught.
Yeah. Christina, how about you?
I definitely learned on the job more than I did in school starting out. So I had a decent amount of assisting experience by the time I had gone back to grad school, where we did learn about like how to be an assistant. But it really is those elements that Vivien and Roya were talking about, where like you kind of have to anticipate the designer's needs and find those places where you can, you know, work on something while something else is going on, or communicating with different team members or different teammates in order to, you know, get the job done faster. And so I think it's valuable to teach the basics of design and the basics of being an assistant so that you can learn those skills so people don't have to teach you how to do the paperwork. But it's also important to teach flexibility, and that every designer is different. Every designer is going to want to do something different. And it's the same thing for like working at a lighting consulting firm. They all do it differently, and you have to be willing to adapt.
That is a great segue to our next question, but first we're going to let Craig answer this one.
Oh, I agree completely with what everybody's said so far. I think it should be taught up to a point. I had the same experience that Roya had in university, was like assisted on shows, but didn't really know what I was doing, pretty much learned on the job. But I think there's some aspect of it, like I think you should look at a lighting production book, or you should look at some finished shows just to know what that job is. And that's what I did when I moved to New York, was just studied old paperwork as much as possible. So I think now with the internet, there's more access to that, and I think programs are starting to develop that more. But I think it's a balance.
I'm gonna do something I don't think I've done this on the show, and I'm gonna answer this question also because I didn't hear the answer I wanted to hear. You know, students are often told when you get out of college, like, you know, they ask the question, like, how do I get work? What do I do? Like, how do I make it through the ranks? And the answer is often work as an assistant, but they don't have those skills. They're taught so many things in college and so many great things, but they're not taught how to like work. They're not hireable. Sometimes, not everyone. I don't want to, you know, it's not everyone, but I think it would serve students and recent graduates well to have a little actual education about what it is that an assistant is supposed to do there. Yeah. When we have the teachers back on our show, they can all yell at me.
Practice calling follow spots would be, I always ask, can you call follow spots? You know, that's like entry level job. So
and hard, and entry level,
and
but
hard.
Very
and possibly the hardest job. Yeah.
And I have to say, it's funny to me that in oftentimes in these situations, the second assistant who is less qualified is the one calling follow spots, because calling follow spots for a Broadway show is not calling anything. You're designing follow spots. You're the person who actually designs what the follow spots does. Yep. It's hard. And the director doesn't look at the associate and say, sometimes the lighting designer and say, where was the follow spot pickup? You know, a lot of directors know exactly who to look at, and it's the poor person sitting at the end of the table, like this.
Well, before we get to the question that Jeff had mentioned, which was a perfect segue, but we'll come back to that in a bit. But Samuel asks, how and when does mentorship decide your professional future? Does that make sense? Deer in headlights. No.
I'm gonna make someone answer this question, but well, Christina, what do you think? Do you want to take a shot?
Sure. I think that having a really good mentor is really important, and it gives you a really good idea and guideline of how to kind of manage yourself, but also like ask those stupid questions that we all have, like, how do I call a follow spot? And then somebody's like, oh, okay. But having a good mentor means that they're willing to teach you those things. And I think that it only is valuable to you. I still talk to my undergrad professor. I still do. We're still friends. And I still say, hey, I have this question for you. I'm not really sure how to answer it. What do you think?
I think you have to have someone you can call your mentor. I don't know. Maybe that's too broad an answer, but it's important. Yeah, Craig, go ahead.
I think mentorship comes in all shapes and sizes, and it starts as young as high school or even middle school community. Like my technical theater teacher in high school was invaluable and set me on a path to be where I am now. But then I worked with Paul Gallo for 8 years, and he taught me a ton of stuff. And like, sure. I learned, and I hear his voice in my head. So you hear your mentor's voices in your head. So it's important to continually get new mentors along the way and know that they can come in, they can just be a little bit, a slice of mentorship, or it can be a whole big thing.
Tim Rogers, who was on our show last week, does a great Paul Gallo impersonation, and it sounds a lot like his Hal Prince impersonation. So 2 weeks ago, but you're right, and that is and Paul is someone to learn from. I mean, he has done so much in this business. Does anyone else want to take a crack at that one? I think we can move on, Drew.
Okay. And don't hold back on this one, since we have a lighting designer as one of the hosts. How do you adapt to working with different designers, and do the expectations vary from designer to designer? Vivien?
Expectations do vary, and that's part of the associate. That's one of the more interesting parts of the job for me, is to be able to read people and to read a room and know what needs your input at any time. It's just, to me, it's one of the most interesting parts of the job.
Yeah.
Christina?
I would say I have to agree with Vivien. It's one of the things that is the most interesting and most fascinating part of being an associate, is figuring out what makes your designer tick and what your designer needs at any given moment to continue forward. I find myself kind of looking at some of past designs and trying to see like what they did in past designs and what I can implement or make better in the current paperwork. And then the trick for me is our principal designers work on varying types of projects. So one day I might be working on a music venue, and another day I might be working on a theme park attraction with the same person. And how they approach that is completely different. And so you kind of have to jump from one to the other. And I write a list of everything that every designer, like what they like, so that I can remember.
Sure.
And Roya, don't forget Al is watching.
Al's watching.
Al knows everything I have to say about it.
Okay.
I think that actually my experience with Ailey is kind of unique, because I'm a little bit of a double associate. I'm associate lighting director for the company and for Al as lighting director, but also acting as an associate for all of the guest designers that come through. And that experience is really unique. Some of them sit down at the tech table and they want the magic sheet in front of them and they want to see all their channels. And some of them just want to call ideas and systems and say like stage left, clear pipe ends. And then it's part of that translating to the programmer what the channels are and all that. So figuring out what the way that a designer speaks is a big part of it as well.
Agreed.
And Craig?
Yeah, I try to feel my way through when I'm working with a new design relationship. I try to feel out the preferences by both asking them questions, but not too many questions. I also try to sort of go by initiative, and sometimes I work harder in a new relationship to try to say, okay, like give a bunch of different options. Like, do you like this one? Do you like that one? And I also agree with what was said before about looking at old paperwork, that kind of thing. And that it's awesome to be able to like jump between different people and cater to whatever their preferences are. It's one of the great parts of the job. You're not just stuck at one place for years and years. You get to move around. There's always an opening night. On to the next one, So.
Yep.
Well, we do have some juicy details from Kate. Says, I can offer that raw almonds definitely make Jeff tick. And as his co-host, I will write that one down.
I do like the raw almonds. Thank you, Kate.
Al Radella is backstage. We're going to, let's make sure we get a couple pounds of almonds sent over to Jeff.
That's right. I have to say that to anyone out there who might be watching who has assisted me, I didn't ask you to join this panel for the reason that Drew just said. I didn't want to be indicted in front of but I love you all, and we'll have you on next time. I think Roya brought this up. You mentioned tech tables, and this is a question for the group, and anyone can answer if you like. Do you find that every designer wants a different tech table layout, or is it all pretty much universal? I mean, feel free to jump in if you'd like. No.
I think that it's
Go, Roya.
Okay. I think there are basics. It's pretty similar. Some people have little quirks that they do and don't like. Some people like tons of paperwork everywhere. Some people are very specific about the things that are on the table. Al is very specific about what is on the table, and having a clean tech table is super important in order to be creative and allow that to flow. So I think that it's relatively the same, but everybody has their little quirks in my experience.
Vivien, Craig, Christina, anything you want to add to that? Do you want to tell us secrets about someone you've worked for who has a
I mean, everyone's different, but I actually am going to go out on a limb and say that things are starting to get, because of EOS magic sheets or electronic magic sheets. That's it's kind of streamlining the process and universalizing the process for everyone, where everybody had different magic sheet things, from big giant things or the light plot or pages or whatever, and that is starting to be now all contained in monitors. And so I've started to notice that we're kind of all ending up being the same now across a wide range of designers, but that's just my look towards,
because you're tied to a cord in a way.
At the same time, everybody's got something that they need in order for it to feel like home at the tech table, and it's because you have to do your art there, your painting, and so you have to feel comfy. So whatever that is, we'll get it.
And and each project is different. A lot of the things that Craig and you and Vivien do, you're there for 2 months. I mean, for months. It is home. You're setting up an office. They take out, for anyone who doesn't know, on some of these big Broadway shows, they actually remove the theater chairs and bring in rolly chairs so that you can actually be comfortable. It's almost civilized. There's a different, that you want to feel like you can work. It's so important. And how many, through the years, how many tech tables have all of us sat at that have just been uncomfortable, or the wrong height, or the wrong whatever. So I feel like it does make a difference, and you can't always get what you want.
I will say that's really true when it comes to architecture or themed entertainment, because your tech table might be a moving vehicle. So what can you put on a moving vehicle? What is important? So you kind of have to find those things that work. And, I always try to keep everything in my back pocket. That way, if the designer needs something, I'm like, oh, here it is. Great.
Yeah, sure.
But I try to make sure it's not, overcrowded or anything, and not anything that they're not going to use, but have it if they're ever like, well, what did they say about that one thing? And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. But yeah, it's hard when it's, a moving vehicle, or, you're in a store and you don't have anywhere to put things. So you have to be creative. Yep.
And before we move on, anyone else want to add anything to that? Drew, I think you can take us to our next.
Okay. Yeah, a few weeks ago, we had Electrician on the show, and we talked about their relationship with equipment rental companies, like the one I work for, Four-Wall. What is your relationship with equipment rental companies and or manufacturers? Christina?
We work with manufacturers all the time, and we also work with rental companies, but a little less when you're doing a lot of permanent installations. We request samples. We talk to them about custom modifications we might need for a fixture, if it's possible to do that. It really just depends. And, this area is more fluid for our entire team because we're all communicating together with the manufacturers. I have a lot of friends who are manufacturers, and it's just something that comes with the territory.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Roya, what about you?
Yes, we have a very close relationship with Floorwall. At Ailey, Floorwall is has been the rental company we've used since I think 2005, and you have all been extremely supportive. Al Rodella calls us the Antique Roadshow, and rollers in his shop again. But there's so much support in making things happen that need to happen at Ailey, and that is very much appreciated. Manufacturers as well, it's a really great process to be able to be at the shootouts when new pictures are being developed, and being a part of that conversation with the people who are actually going to use it. And that, I think, is part of what makes a good manufacturer.
Yeah, and Craig, I'll kind of change it up a little bit, but what do you think, how does the relationship help you?
I think as a Broadway associate, it's really the lighting designer and in a lot of ways the production electrician who need to feel extremely comfortable with the shop that we go with for the show. So that's how that end of it works. And so we have to stay a little bit neutral because we bid out shows. That being said, having close relationships with people at shops and also manufacturers as far as seeing demos of new equipment is crucial, because we're constantly looking for the new stuff, and so that's one way we interact with shops.
And Vivien?
I would say it's similar to every other question you've asked. It depends on the situation. I've done a lot of shows with designers from other countries, at which point I will step in and deal with the shops much more closely, and in tandem with the production electrician. Certainly, think that. Am I echoing on everybody else, or is it just me?
Me
right.
too, but it's okay. I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a bit annoying. Something as an associate you never want to do. So it sort of depends. And manufacturers, I find them fast. I just love the whole development and seeing what's new. So I do it more for my own edification than out of necessity.
Sure. Makes sense. We have some interesting comments and questions, but let's hit the next question, and maybe we'll bring it in. So this sort of the same question, but now, what is your relationship with the electrician? And Craig, let's start with you on that.
Affable.
Number one, affable.
I mean, good natured. You try to. With electricians you've worked with before, it should just be like a mind meld of sorts of things. And then with new relationships, you're constantly looking to see, okay, how does this person work? How does that? I think the most important thing is to allow them to do their job and work with files and take control over them with however they need to do it. And everybody's different, and so and so they should be able to work with their files and not let it affect your workflow. And that's the biggest thing that has to get worked out in a new relationship.
Yeah. Roya, how about you in your
Yeah, I think the relationship with an associate and an electrician is super important, because you are kind of the meeting point of creative and technology. Mark Gonzalez is the head electrician at Ailey, and our flow of communication is super important, and there's often a lot of things that have to happen on the design side, and he's also dealing with building the rig. And so I think being able to communicate about what each other need allows for not having any animosity about, trying to, well, you're asking me to do this crazy thing without explaining why. I think explaining why is important so that everybody can support.
Yeah. I think the really good electricians like to know why, even and not for any other reason other than to know how they can help. Not to see if it's worth it, because then they, because sometimes at 8 o'clock in the morning when they're actually doing the work and the designer is far away from the theater and the assistant is 8 minutes from arriving, or an hour and 8 minutes, whatever it is, they have to make the decision, and sometimes that's a design decision. So I think that's a really great point. Christina, how about you?
I would say it's really similar in what I do. I'm trying to create an atmosphere where I can communicate and ask questions, and they can ask questions and let me know when things are wrong so that we can proactively fix them. And, to Roya's point, being able to empower the electricians to want to help you with your design is so important, even in architecture and themed entertainment.
Yeah.
Vivien, empower, no pun intended. Empower.
Vivien, that was a dad joke.
I'm a dad. I know, I'm a dad.
Vivien, do you want to add anything to that? Anything more to that?
I'm just going to say that it's probably the most important relationship to me. It's the two, myself and the production electrician are two halves of a whole, really.
Yeah. Sure. So let's actually wait. There was a comment I wanted to bring in. Paul Kilzonk's comment. Do you see that one, Drew?
Yep.
Which I think is interesting. Be careful when you're allowing a young assistant to work under the title of associate. Oftentimes they feel entitled to tell the production electrician how to do something rather than the actual problem. What do you think? I've found that production electricians have come up to me to say, not for nothing, but I know what I'm doing. Please tell your assistant that I know what I'm doing. I don't know if you've run into that before, but I think that's a good point. You have to, being an associate designer, you have to actually work into that position. It's not something that's handed to people.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to tell the production electrician how to do something either, but I might phrase it as the designer's preference is that we blah, hang a truss there, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's true.
I also think that maybe that is one of the key qualities of being an associate is being able to read those situations.
Sure.
Insert your opinion where it's inappropriate.
I've always said that actually one of the two things that would be most helpful in being an associate is a psychology degree and a diplomacy degree.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that goes on in terms of, because you're the chain of your top of the chain of communication to everyone else, and it's really how you phrase things and when you phrase them.
Yeah. Well, moving on.
Running out of time here.
Running out of time. I know. All right. So we'll get through the rest of these quickly, I think.
I think Harrison's question is almost kind of the same one that we were just going to ask, Jeff.
Yeah,
so
I agree. Great. Let's do that.
Is there any new technology that you're excited to use once we're able to go back to work? And then on top of that, which is kind of what we were going to say, is there any technology that has made your job easier or harder?
Let's take easier and harder. You can answer both or one or the other.
Yeah, and we'll go to Roya first.
Okay. I think specifically at Ailey, sometimes technology has made my job harder because as far as documenting and archiving paperwork, because I'm no longer just creating a piece of paperwork that's a cell number. I have to document the fixture type and every single value of every single parameter that is used so that we can, because it's a repertory company, it has to be able to be recreated down the line. But on the flip side, in the events world, technology has actually made things a lot easier because it's really about speed, and technology helps speed.
Yeah. Craig, how about you?
I'm going to go with the death of color scrollers has made life easier.
That has been the number one answer when we ask this question on the show. That is the number one answer. And I'm going to say right now, you can't say LED tape is making your job harder. I should have said that earlier.
No, I'm not saying that, but I will. But harder, I will say that the color mixing in general, the freedom that color mixing brings, and trying to do shows in the future, similar to what Roy was saying, is like trying to go internationally with a different kind of moving light and then have those colors translate is like a huge issue, where it used to be, oh, this, you know, R36 is R36.
R36 is R36, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're still working with how best to do that.
Yep. Vivien, what do you think?
I agree with the scroller LED or other fixture thing. I think also for me, the thing that I've been hoping for the 30 years that I've been doing this is all of the talking to each other that the elites and the consoles and the computers are now doing, and that you don't press, 12, have 3 different people writing down the same thing or pressing a button. I think that's making things easier. It's also making it harder for me because now I have to learn all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Worth it though, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Because I do think that makes my job easier. Anyone else want to take this question?
I will say that technology makes it harder for us in architecture and in themed entertainment because everybody's moving into this world of like 3D. And so we're trying to always keep up with the next piece of software that comes out. And we can do amazing things, like, we can do amazing 3D renderings that are starting to show people what we're actually thinking before we get there. And they know what the building is going to look like. But at the same time, like, if we don't know that software program, or we're just learning it, and there's no real guidelines to how to execute a specific type of design in it, we're learning on the fly all the time.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So what's the hardest part of your job? Christina, let's stay with you.
I think for me, it's probably the design side. And I say that because a lot of what I do is permanent, right? And I'm not always working with source 4s. I'm sometimes working with downlights or a linear grays fixture or something that I have to get right the first time, because if I don't, it's not going to move and it's going to be in the wrong place, right? Like, I can't just take a source 4 and point it somewhere. I have to make decisions and keep those decisions aligned. And then if they don't work in the field, I have to be able to work on the fly to make adjustments to them. And I think that's the hardest part for me, because it adds a lot more pressure to the plot, like to drafting.
Sure. Scary. That's right. I mean, especially for someone who works in live theater, it's, hopefully it lasts forever, but, eventually it's ephemeral.
Right.
Anyone else want to tackle this one? What's hard, Craig? What's hard? What's the hardest part of your job?
I think the set electrics specifications is like on Broadway when you're spending millions of dollars on light bulbs and stuff. It's like architecture in that you have to be super detailed, and it's so different from drawing a light plot where you can make changes or add a light or scoot something over. Set electric specs are done way in advance, and I think that's hard. My other answer was going to be the stress of scheduling multiple projects, and how to juggle that is actually difficult.
How do you do it? I mean, how do you make those decisions?
Carefully,
I know it's hard. For all of us who are freelance, I'm sure it's hard for anyone, but it is very difficult. Especially if you were hired to do a big Broadway show, you're there for a long time. So that makes it even harder.
It's soul crushing to give up like a project you feel really passionately about or you've been involved with for a long time in order to do another project that you feel very passionate about, and it sucks that they happen at the same time, but 50% of the time they do.
And, the thing about lighting designers is that some can do both, but the associate really cannot be in 2 places at the same time, where a lighting designer often can be in 2 places at the same time.
Very true.
I respect. Vivien, would you like to take a shot at this answer?
I can't. I mean, I don't have an answer other than to say that I did try architectural for a while and fled because the thought of being stuck in concrete was too much for me. I think set electrics are a big chunk of time, but I I don't know that I have a specific artist.
It's almost like Set Electrics needs a separate assistant. I mean, like just put some. It's like a whole light plot.
It can be, yeah.
Set Electric. It's bigger than some light plots. And see, I knew somehow LED tape would get into this conversation.
Sorry, me?
Yeah, do you want to add anything to this?
I guess in a more broad sense, one of the hardest parts is actually maybe one of my favorite parts is the constant multitasking that has to happen and the constant flow of communication that has to happen, but also, as Craig said earlier in the session, that the bigger picture things, keeping those two things in your vision at the same time can be challenging when you're moving really fast.
We are completely running out of time, and we want to know what you guys have been up to. This has been so, speaking about hard and stressful, it's been a crazy time for all of us. What have you been up to? Anything you've ignored that you're finally getting to or want to get to? Have you cooked anything that you've never cooked before? New hobbies? Anything that surprised you? Personal revelations? Vivien.
I started out being very stressed out about not working, and I started out being very, trying to thinking I needed to work, and now I have given up on all of that, and I spent a lot of time in my hammock, out in natural light, and I don't think I've spent this much time. That's me in my hammock. My hammock, and I don't think I've spent this much time in my entire life in my own apartment. And I've noticed a lot of things in my apartment that I'm now clearing out.
Very, very good use of time.
I like that point of view shot too.
I know. You look at, even when you're back in the theater, you should keep that as your desktop on your computer to remember. Christina, how about you?
So I have been working still.
Yes, right.
Just did a summer camp series where we kind of gave back to a bunch of students and recent graduates who had, lost their internships for the summer or their jobs for the summer. So we did what we called our virtual summer camp, and we walked them through a process and we talked to them about what we do. Because sometimes I think what we do is still a mystery. And to me, it's still a mystery too. Sometimes I'm like, wait, we do that? Oh, that's cool. I didn't think about that. And so we just kind of took them on this 7-week journey with us, and it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed getting to know everybody. And then outside of that, I have been cycling and hiking and swimming and reading a lot. And my husband's a carpenter, so we build a lot of custom furniture. My desk is actually custom. We made it just for this office, just for me. And spending time with my dog.
So you got back on the old bike after breaking the leg, huh?
Yeah, I did.
That's awesome.
You didn't send us a picture of your new desk, which you have to post it. We'll post it.
Yeah, post it in the comments. Sorry,
Yeah. Craig, how about you?
I've sort of learned to cook using the HelloFresh service, which was a big step for me. But professionally, I've been lucky to have Beauty and the Beast, which is a new design that Natasha Katz is designing that's going to take place in the UK. I believe it's been announced now. Next year in May, tour around the UK. So we've been working on that. So that's been nice to have a little bit to work on. Yeah.
Always,
I've played around with augmented 3D and tried to get my brain around that a little bit. Maybe not as much as others, but I feel like I could go with it.
Sure.
Feel like we could use it. Comfortable enough. Yeah.
I can maybe go with it. Roya, how about you? Wait, before we do that, I just remembered what you said. You've learned how to cook. Ken Billington was one of the first guests on the show, and one of the things he said was that he was learning how to cook pasta because he never cooked. I mean, he's a lot of that for a very long time, and he works more than almost anyone I know. And I think he's eaten in restaurants his entire life. So next week we're going to have him on to see if he's graduated from pasta to something else.
To turkey burgers, I would hope. Yeah.
Roya, how about you?
Speaking of cooking is kind of a second passion of mine. So I've been spending a lot of time cooking. I enjoy taking traditional Persian dishes and figuring out creative ways to make them vegan. So I've done a lot of that. I am not currently working. I've spent a decent amount of time trying to be active in the protests and doing some anti-racism work. And like Vivien, trying to, this is the most amount of time I've spent in my apartment in a very long time. So, reorganizing things, throwing things out, making it a little more cozy.
Yeah. I started organizing things, and then as our return to work keeps getting like pushed further away, I've been even procrastinating on that. Like, looks like I'm gonna be here, so I'll get to that basement. And I will that basement. Okay, one last question. Well, actually, before I say this, there are a lot of comments, and I encourage you after all of our guests, when we're done, to go back on Four Walls Facebook page and take a look and respond if you'd like or as you'd like. There are some good questions. There's one about 3D visualization programs that we could spend an hour talking about that. So I think I'll let you speak to that directly. But our last question is, what advice do you have for young people who want to do what you do? Christina, let's start with you. You just started talking about something that you guys were doing, but do you have anything else?
I just say be persistent. You have to find your passion and you have to follow it. And don't let anybody discourage you from doing it. And in fact, use that to kind of fuel your passion even more. You got to look for opportunities to broaden your horizons. I never would have gotten into this if I hadn't have been looking for other opportunities outside of theater, because I started in theater. And, at the same time, you have to be aware of when the door is closing on your opportunity and start looking for new ones. And you'll never know what you will find.
Great answer. I agree. Roya.
I think this is an extremely challenging time for young people entering the field, so best of luck. But I also think that because we have been forced to stop, this is a moment for the industry to reinvent itself in certain ways, and I think that that's something that young folks can really help shape. So I guess I would say, don't accept the things that don't feel right just because that's the way it's always been done. You're here to push us all forward and hold the industry to a higher standard. And in that way.
And I think that applies, Roya, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think it applies to so many things. Just because it's been done, I hate when someone says we don't do it this way because that's the way we've done it for 20 years. That's not an answer to that question. There's always a new way of looking at things. And I think you're right. When we come back, I think everyone, not just our business, everyone is going to be looking at everything a little bit differently. So I think we all have to embrace that. And I feel like everyone I speak to in our business is embracing it in a pretty great way. So that's encouraging to me. Craig, have you answered the question? No, great, Craig.
I would second everything everybody said. I would say that keep in touch with everyone you've ever met, because you never know where that job is going to come from and what your path is going to be to break in. And it may not be the path that you have written down in your goals for you, but you just have to follow those opportunities. I will also recommend that staying on top of new software and tools is going to be good. Like having this 3D stuff and being able to present that, being able to offer those as a skill set is something that's marketable. So, stay current.
And Vivien.
I agree with what everybody said. And I think that my advice is just to stay in touch with yourself as well. Make sure that where you're heading is where you really want to go, and to realize that the best laid plans are not necessarily what's going to happen, and that they may lead you into other directions. I think that staying in touch with yourself is really important.
We all adapt. That's what we do. And people who work in live entertainment, we adapt. I mean, that's part of why I'm in this business, because I like that, and it's an exciting part of it. So we're all going to adapt to whatever happens next. I will add to anyone just graduating or any young people interested. There are 4 panelists here, and there's a lot of us kind of hanging out right now. Even if some are working, there's still some time. Email people and have conversations about what it is they do and how to do what they do or what you want to do. I'm not sure that sentence actually made any sense, but does anyone have on our panel here have anything to add or retract or clarify before we go? Thank you all for joining us. Drew, is there anything else you want to?
No, I think that's it. Just like what Jeff said, definitely go back in the comments. There's a lot there, and I think if you want to respond to those, it'd actually be really helpful. And thank you everybody again. It was exciting to be back. We took last weekend off, so it was a great panel. Thank you so much, and we will see you everybody next week.
Next week, yeah. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.